Often enough, I find myself overwhelmed by what seems like an unending amount of tasks, and the default setting for me has always been to get a little confused and unfocused. We've all heard about productivity, how we can restructure our lives and improve the quality of our work, and to me, it's clear that oftentimes our to-do lists and our calendars demand more than our willpower often offers. In this video, I want to talk about some of the ways that I've countered these symptoms of laziness and stress. So I have three main points in this video, but just to preface things, the first thing to understand about productivity, and I think this is the most important thing to understand, is that it really is entangled with our fragile wills. Without the will to do certain things, we really can't get anything done at all. We always have to take a step of intention and have motivation to do things. And so for me, the key takeaway of this point is that we have limited cognitive resources and we also have limited willpower. And so understanding some of our own personal limitations in this respect can really help us organize our time, and it should also tell us about the ways that we should organize our time and adapt our work life to our own personal imperfections. So there are three things that I'm going to be outlining in this video. The first one is organization, the second one is overload, and the third one is distractions. So the first tip I have is focus on organizing your tasks. Ultimately, you have to know what your tasks are before you can actually complete them. So for me, this means listing and visualizing some of the tasks that I have so I can get in the driver's seat and control a little bit more of what I'm supposed to be doing. Recently, I've really started to use Google Calendar for this. I've organized all my school tasks on there. I also add in extracurriculars, some personal activities that I do, and then also time just to wind down and use for some less restrictive things. So there are a lot of different ways you can do this. Reminders are a great way. Making a to-do list is also really important. Sometimes I just have to sit down and list all my tasks so I know exactly what I have to do. Just being able to see everything in one spot is really helpful, and then also checking those things off as you go is super important. And the truth is, organization is the easiest thing to control in this process. Essentially, when you get control of your schedule and you're able to visualize all your tasks, it becomes that much easier to actually do the tasks themselves. And so ultimately, organization is something that you can control. You can adjust your calendar, you can use a to-do list. It's really just the easiest way to remove some resistance between you and the tasks that you have to complete. Find whatever method works for you. There are a lot of different ways to try this out, but the important thing is that you know your schedule, you know your tasks, so that you have a good idea of what you need to get done and when. The second task on this list is overload. Overload is what I call the state when you're stressed, you're overwhelmed, you just have an unending amount of tasks, and you're not really sure when to start, or you struggle to kind of build up that willpower that you need to complete your tasks. And so overload is one of those things that we actually can control. We can mitigate some of the consequences of being overwhelmed and having so many tasks that are just piling up on one another. And out of all the strings that we can pull with respect to our tasks, controlling overload and overwhelm is hugely important. Obviously, there are things that we can't control. We can't control if we have a lot of tasks that are due in a concentrated amount of time. We can't control the amount of work that we actually have to do because that's coming from an external source. For me, part of this process is about pursuing balance. The problem for many is that over-concentrating your efforts in one area will inevitably damage and drain the success of your work in others. And I would argue that prioritizing balance above all things can improve your work not just on the micro scale, but also on the macro scale. To give a concrete example, school is really the biggest source of stress and work for me. I constantly have tasks that I have to get, and as it is, it's really the most demanding part of my life. But ultimately, I find that looking for balance, being able to spend time with people or doing things that I love, or even just pursuing other activities like working out and reading, they've actually really helped me focus when the time comes to do schoolwork. So in other words, when I've centralized too much of my work towards school, I notice that my willpower just tends to be destroyed because I'm having to do so much of one thing, and ultimately those tasks get tiresome very quickly. So making time for some of those extra things, and of course this feeds back into the organization tips that I gave before, will actually deepen and enable you in some of the other areas, specifically those that are more challenging and demanding. And so the last category that I want to talk about is distractions. So the first thing to understand is that distractions are all around us. They are simply unavoidable. But importantly, we can attempt to control them or suppress them in our own own lives. Now, this might mean using concrete services to structure our time online. It can also mean just adjusting our environment to really avoid the possibility of us getting lost in distractions in the first place. Internet spirals for me have always kind of been a problem. If I go onto YouTube, I generally click on another video and then I'm lost in some rabbit hole of videos and I just lose track of time. So I've actually adopted a new strategy where I just pick a time of day where I can watch YouTube and I stick to that time very strictly so I'm not getting lost all the time, and I'm encouraged to be a little bit more conscious about what I'm watching in the first place. I've also used different services to track my use of electronic devices. On my phone, I track my screen time. I also use an app called Rescue Time on my computer. These help me gauge where I'm using my time, and honestly, just looking at the numbers just pushes you away from some of those bad activities that you know aren't very useful in your life. And then, of course, adjusting your environment is key. When I'm trying to do work, I always hide my phone or I turn on some blockers so I can't go onto distracting websites. These help you get focused on the tasks that you're actually trying to complete. The moment a distraction enters your view, you actually completely lose focus on the tasks that you're trying to complete. And obviously, focus is one of the most important things when it comes to actually producing things that are of quality. So that's it for my 3 tips, factors, categories, whatever you want to call them, when it comes to productivity and balancing my life. Above all, though, these are just philosophies. You can find your own ways of applying them in your own life. It's always good to start with the intention to be productive. And really the best thing for being productive is really just having a good attitude about things. Sometimes just taking a break, listening to some music, going for a walk really boosts my spirits, and it's able to let me re-enter my work with a newfound focus. With that being said, that's the end of this video. Hope you enjoyed. Hope you learned something that you can apply to your own life. And with that, I will see you in the next video.